Hello, everyone. My name is Jessica Rowland with the Office of Alumni Engagement, and I'd like to welcome you to our Go Vote, a voter education series. We present to you today our session, Proposition 101. In this session, we'll be reviewing Proposition 1 that's going to be on our ballots this coming March. To lead us through this session, I'd like to introduce Dr. Sarah Hill. Dr. Sarah Hill is a professor of political science and the director of graduate studies for Cal State Fullerton. She earned her Ph.D. in social science from the California Institute of Technology. Her teaching interests are state and local government, especially California, and public policy. Dr. Hill's research can be found in the American Review of Public Administration and the Journal of Education Finance. Thank you for being with us today, Dr. Hill. The show is yours.
Thank you so much, Jessica. We're going to go ahead and jump on in. You have probably already seen several commercials about Proposition 1, so we're going to go ahead and work through that together. Proposition 1 has two parts. The first part is changing a previous proposition. So as a whole, Proposition 1 is meant to address mental health treatment in the state and homelessness. And it does that in a few ways. Part 1 would change an initiative that we passed in 2004. Voters passed the Changes Mental Health Services Act. And anytime that there is a change to a previous initiative, the voters have to approve it. So that's one reason why it's coming to us. What that proposition did was it instituted a 1% tax on Californians who have an income over $1 million a year. So it's called a millionaire's tax. And currently, under that first law, 95% of the funds from that tax go to counties to provide mental health services. So it's given to the counties, and they have a fair bit of freedom in deciding exactly how they want to allocate that money to support mental health services. The remaining 5% stays with the state to handle some statewide administrative costs. So Proposition 1 would change the way that millionaire's tax works. There would not be a change in the tax. There are no new taxes here. The state would still be collecting the same amount of money. The change is in how that money is allocated. Now, it's 90%, so 5% less of the money would go to the counties to spend on mental health services, and they would be told how they have to spend some of that money. The way they allocate it across categories would change, and they would have to redirect about a third of their funds toward housing interventions. So one of the goals of this proposition is to create more housing. And one of the ways it would do that is by mandating the way that counties spend their money would go to housing intervention for mental health services. Then the remaining 10%, the state would be getting a little bit more of the money. 10% would stay with the state to handle overall administrative costs. So that's the first part of this. The second part of the proposition is a bond. The state would sell $6.4 billion in bonds to expand mental health services and substance abuse treatment. So again, tackling the same issues just in another way. $4.4 billion would go toward building about 10,000 inpatient and residential treatment beds. It's estimated California, I think we're about 8,000 beds short of what we need in the state. And so this is meant to build needed treatment beds. One of the things you might have heard quite a bit in the commercials that we've been seeing is that this proposition supports veterans. It does, in that part of it, of the remaining $2 billion that will go to fund permanent supportive housing to help with mental health and substance abuse treatment, half of that, so $1 billion, is designated specifically for veterans. So that's the piece of this that is specific to veterans. The rest would be for Californians at large. So to summarize, if you vote yes on Proposition 1, that means you support a change in the allocation of county funds for mental health services, moving in the direction of housing interventions, and you support a $6.4 billion bond to expand mental health and substance abuse treatment and housing. If you vote no, there's no change in the existing allocation of county funds for health services, for mental health services, and there would not be any bonds sold for substance abuse treatment and housing. So that's what a yes and a no would mean. A question that I think it's always important to answer is, how did this get on the ballot? Because there are different ways that propositions land on the ballot. This is what we call a legislative statute. So it was put on the ballot by the legislature. The legislature actually passed two bills that are combined together to create Proposition 1. And in voting for it, it was supported by all Democratic members of the legislature and some Republican members. And then it was signed by Governor Newsom. So anytime the legislature asks us to change a previous initiative and or pass a bond, and this has both, it has to go to a vote of the people. So in passing this, the legislature knew this would come to Californians for a vote, and that's how it got onto the ballot. Who supports this? You've probably noticed Governor Newsom is a huge supporter. You've probably seen his commercials. They're all over the place right now. He crafted this. This is his big project, and he pretty much gave it to the legislature to pass for him. So this is definitely his big project. He's very passionate about getting this passed in this election. It is supported officially by the California Democratic Party, by the California Chamber of Commerce, and it's endorsed by the Los Angeles Times, to give you a sense of who some of these supporters are. Their arguments are that it will help with California's homelessness, with mental health and addiction crises, that those are seen as huge issues, and this is a step toward fixing those. The side for this, pretty much Gavin Newsom's campaign, has raised more than $14 million, and so that's how they're able to run all of those commercials. Something really interesting about this is Governor Newsom actually had the legislature, there were going to be some other propositions on this March ballot. He had them move those to November so that there is only one proposition on this ballot. Prop 1 is getting all the attention. He's that serious about it. He wanted it to be the only one, and they went along with it. So we'll have more to vote on in November, but he wanted the focus just on Prop 1 for March. Who are the opponents? The California Republican Party is actually neutral. They don't have a stance on it. Some mental health groups oppose it. Very interesting. A group I usually pay a lot of attention to is the League of Women Voters of California, because they care about good government, and they actually are against their Proposition 1. The Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association is against it, and the Orange County Register has encouraged voters to vote no on Proposition 1. The arguments here are that a few things. One is there's concern it would be taking money away from county programs that are working. And so it's taking away local control, taking away some funding that's needed for local services. There's a lot of concern about what that will do to local services that are needed. Another big concern, and this is what the League of Women Voters is really emphasizing, is that it was rushed through the legislature. It was a really fast vote. They think it needs a little bit more input. They're not completely opposed to the topic, but they think it needs some more work and input from healthcare and civil rights advocates before we move forward on changing it. There's a concern that there might be some involuntary measures taken because of this proposition. And so some folks are concerned about that. The opposition isn't very strong, though. Only $1,000 have been raised to oppose it. And so there isn't really strongly organized opposition. You're not seeing commercials vote no on Proposition 1. So that's the rundown. I hope that's helpful to you. And I wish you very happy voting in the March 5th election.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hill. We really appreciate that. So much information. Thank you very much. One of the questions I know that we might get asked, even though I think it was answered, but to confirm, this bill or proposition wouldn't cost Californians extra, correct? It's already something that we are taxed on and pay towards.
So it's a little bit subtle. Part 1, where we're changing the existing millionaire's tax, no change there, no new tax, that stays exactly the same. Part 2, where we would be issuing bonds, that will cost the state. That will come out of the general revenue, the general budget, and the state will pay that off over time. So in that sense, that will cost the voters something as we pay it off over time, but it will come out of the general revenue. There's no indication of a new tax at this time.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Again, we really appreciate you taking the moment to kind of share with us the little insight on Proposition 1.
My pleasure.
Thank you again. We hope you enjoyed today's session and were able to get all of your answers or all your questions answered. If you should have a question that wasn't answered today, feel free to email alumnievents@fullerton.edu and we'll do our best to get it to Dr. Hill for answering. We wish everyone luck this March in the voting booths, and we will see everyone in the fall when we'll be going over all of those wonderful new propositions that will be on our November ballots. Thank you again, Dr. Hill, and everyone have a wonderful day. Thank you.